Corner, and welcome to my channel. And today I want to give you a few tips and tricks of sewing. If you're a beginner, you might really find them helpful. If you're a seasoned sewer, you may know them all. But sometimes if we kind of forget about these tricks that we had learned years ago, and maybe it'll remind us again. Anyway, the first thing you do when you start to sew is press your fabric. You want it pressed. If it's kind of a fine, loosely woven, you might want to give it some spray starch and make sure it's nice and flat before you start cutting out your pattern. And that's tip number one. And if you're a new sewer and you want to start to sew, don't go out and buy a bunch of fabric and think you're going to make a fancy dress for yourself. It probably won't work. But first of all, start practicing on old fabric. Say an old shirt or an old dress, cut it up in pieces and sew it. Sew curves in it, cut it on curves and whatever, and get to know your machine. I know when I go to make a buttonhole, I'll make it 3 or 4 times, sometimes more, if I'm not getting it the way I like, on a scrap piece of the fabric I'm using, just to make sure I've got it right, because you can pick a buttonhole out, but it's very time consuming, and there's always a chance you'll cut your fabric. So try practicing things before you start. And when you're sewing a seam, never watch your needle. Watch the guide. Now, most machines have little marks, 1/2 and 1/4 and 5/8 of an inch, all along up here, which is good. But sometimes they're a little hard to see. And other times you can just use the edge of your pressure foot to guide. Say you wanted your seam in here and you guided your pressure foot right along here. That's fine too. Or if you want, you can take a piece of tape, piece of cardboard, anything to stick on your machine so that you have something to guide. Say you want your seam in 1.5 inches. Tape this, put your tape 1.5 inches from your needle, and then just guide your fabric along that line. And you'll have 1.5 inches seam in here. But don't watch your needle, because you're always adjusting and it never comes out straight. And when you're practicing, take old spools of thread with a little bit on them. Use that up. Use up the little bits that's on the bobbins. I know it's but it's good practice figuring out how to thread your machine and put your bobbin in and get it all working well. That's a good. And then if you're making a top and you're wanting to put buttons on it, take the fullest part of your bust, and that's where you start putting the first button on, right in the fullest part, and then adjust your buttons from there. Most ready-to-wear buttons are placed just above and below And what happens? It pulls open. And that's uncomfortable to wear because you're always adjusting it, trying to pull it together. I used to take and put a dome or, well, I still do if I have a new top with, I haven't had a new top with buttons on lately, but put a dome or a hook and eye on there. But if you put your button right at that fullest part, you don't have that problem. And then adjust your buttons from there. You go to the top one because sometimes you don't have a lot of space between your fullest part of your bust, and especially if it's a low neckline. So use that measurement and then adjust the rest of your buttons accordingly. And another thing I like to do is when I put my buttons on, is I tape them in place and then I just stitch over them so I can go from one button to the next and sewing them on with my machine. And I can have the the little holes in the buttons going all the same direction. So I found that very helpful if you have a lot of buttons to sew on. Even if just one button, it's very helpful. And threads. You know, we all want fabric that matches our, we all want our thread to match our fabrics. Well, that's fine, but sometimes we want to do a repair, or we don't want to go to the store to get some. Well, these are great colors. They're muted colors. The black, of course, black and white, we should always have black and white on hand. Now, where's my little scrap here? This is a darker color, but this color would blend in with that nicely and you'd never see it. This one color is a great color. I have used this on a lot of quilts. And it seems to just blend in. It goes with mauves, it goes with reds, not bright reds and things like that. There's pinks and blues a little bit, you know. So I've sewn this together with it. And it blends in with that nicely. So I've used this color a lot. It goes with mauves, it goes with pinks, it goes with browns. Not perfectly, but when you're sewing something like this, are you going to get, if you've got a tight little stitch in there, how are you going to see if that matches 100%? It may be. I know there are people that would disagree with me maybe, but this is another color. An off-white. See, you could use that on that as well. You could use a gray, a light gray. See, those colors just sort of, a mauve You could probably get away with a mauve on that one if you're really a lightweight. Here's another piece it would go with. This is a darker gray. Well, that's maybe, but this gray would look great on there. You'd never see that gray. And these are two see, that looks green and that's blue. But you take that and you blend it in there. It picks up the blue. You don't never see it. So you could easily use this color on there. Maybe not for top stitching, but for a seam, there's another color that would blend in nicely with that. So I would say a must-have in your stash of threads is off-white, grays, black and white, a muted tealy color, a dusty rose, and maybe a brownie shade. Definitely gray and beige and a pink tone. And black and white. And let's see what else. I got a list. I'm all getting all tangled up here. And you want to cut your pattern pieces out straight. You don't want them all jaggy. So what do you mean? When you're cutting something, you don't want to take little short steps like this, because what you end up with a wowed edges. And you cut. See, you don't have it straight. And I probably won't cut this straight, but if you have a good pair of scissors, make the fabric go the length. And you cut like this, the full. And I wowed that. Anyway, do your best. This pair of scissors has a wow in them. I'm trying to blame my tools, but it is true. I do have a wow in it. So a good pair of scissors is always nice to have. And don't cut anything but fabric with them. So I hope some of these tips are helpful. And I have another tip for you. If you're interested in doll clothes, I have the perfect, maybe not the perfect, but a good pattern book for you. It's patterns for all sizes of dolls and all types of dolls, from baby dolls to fashion dolls and all kinds of patterns from size 6 to 24, 23, 24. So check that out at my Etsy shop. I'll leave a link below. And be sure and subscribe. Follow me on Instagram. And thanks for watching. Bye now.